How do you do? The Box Office Pulp Board feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold a cinematic commentary track, made by a group of men who sought to create a podcast after their own ravings, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with three great mysteries of the internet: analysis, observation, and deconstruction. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel you'd not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to... well, we've warned you. Now, to pause and refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby, with buttered popcorn, golden good and hot from the popper, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich, plus delicious Dr. Pepper, so bright and bracing with a tang and tingle unmatched by any other beverage. Enjoy an ice-cold Dr. Pepper at our beverage stand right now, and then return to fully appreciate this bop and a movie commentary track. Enjoy.
Now this is getting to be ridiculous.
Mike's too excited by the devil.
Cody said his prayers tonight, but Mike is excited by the devil.
If we ever make a Bop ad, I think it should be like a Reefer Madness parody warning. Cody says his prayers that night, but Mike worships the devil. And then we just have Jamie dressed up like Satan.
No, Lupita. I'm trying to figure out how that ad could even end on any sensible note, but no, it's just...
I don't think it needs to.
Then they all died in a car accident. Box office pulp.
I think you just have Jamie doing her Satan laugh, and then it just a smash cut to Box Office Pulp. Comes out most months. And then it's just a link to our Twitter.
Okay, independent of everything else, comes out most months is the most Chip Zdarsky thing I've ever heard. Daredevil comes out most months.
I mean, we don't have a true schedule to give anyone, so you gotta just, lighten the blow.
We're weekly.
Mostly weekly.
Box office pulp. It can be listened to.
Box Office Pulp. Normally over 30 minutes long. If you were to average the number of times we premiere an episode per year, it's more than one a month.
Well, why are we like a middle-aged New York Jewish man on a date? Box Office Pulp. What's there to lose?
Box Office Pulp. You should have got the schmear. It's delicious.
Box Office Pulp. Why not?
Box Office Pulp. We keep trying to get Mort Stelly to sponsor us, but they keep saying, no, we'll get you one day, Mort. We'll get you one day.
Box Office Pulp. You're gonna die one day.
True. We're better than a fortune cookie.
Box Office Pulp. Valar Morghulis.
Box office pulp. Behind you.
That's a good one. Can we have business cards?
All right, so we're good to boogie?
Boogie. Yeah, I think you both sound pretty good.
Cool.
Mike is top notch as always.
Well, top men. I don't know what I mean by that.
We're about to box you away into the Covenant area.
No!
Is that like the worst pickup line in the world? Oh, I'd like to have you looked over by top men.
I bet the Nazis hunt you. Where are you going?
I bet I should close my eyes. Close your eyes, Marion. Fuck me.
The maiden called
Fortune
Jamie in the
and
Wild.
glory.
Fuck me. Okay, I'm actually going to start the show now.
Okay, you're gonna shit and start the show now. Okay.
No, I'm going to do both. Don't tell me what I can and can't do, Mike. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Box Office Pulp, your one-stop podcast for movies, madness, moxie, and tonight, more monster mashups. To honor the big Godzilla, king of all monsters, and monster brawls, we're putting out a commentary track for one of my all-time favorite films, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I'm your host, Cody, and my co-host today are Mike, who, coincidentally, is the stitched-up sum of a graveyard's worth of spare body parts. Say hello, Mike.
It's my first time doing this. I'm nervous.
You're going to kill it, kid. And Jamie, who also claims to transform into a wolf when the moon is bright, but I'm pretty sure she's just using that as a cover to explain why her hotel rooms always look like Keith Moon was spending the night there. Say hello, Jamie.
I am filled with big she-hate-me energy.
I'm going to break everything here by saying I think that was the smoothest intro we've ever done. High fives, everyone. High fives.
Yay!
We did it. All of us years of practice, and we finally introduced ourselves without fucking up.
Also, I just want to say, totally, is anybody else agree? Glenn Strange looks nervous the entire time in this movie.
He couldn't stop laughing. He was having too good a time.
But that was delightful. But
that was a guy who got shanghaied into being the Frankenstein monster in a comedy.
There's worse career paths. All right, folks. So if you've never watched a bop in a movie with us before, we're going to play Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and then talk over the movie. If you would like to join us, we're going to have a countdown in just a minute, and you can pop your disc into your DVD player and watch along with us. Or you can treat this like a normal podcast that just goes for like an hour and a half. Your life, your call. You do you, as the saying goes. Before that, though, we have to introduce the official bop drink of the evening. Ooh.
I'm excited.
Stir that ice. So I want everyone to get a visual picture in their head. I am drinking this out of a green ceramic creature from the Black Lagoon tiki mug.
Always on brand. That's the bop style.
I have no idea what this tastes like. And I mean that more so than most episodes, because this is a brew I made up completely on my own. I call it Frankie's Fuck Up.
Yes, I've been waiting for this moment.
So, boy, if you want to go on an experience with me, just whip this up, and we're gonna find out what I did. We'll see. It had stuff from my liquor cabinet that theoretically should go together, so I don't think I could have messed up too much. So you want to get 1.5 ounces of Jamaican aged rum. You're gonna get 1.5 ounces of gold rum. You're gonna get 1/4 ounce of Campari. You can get 1/2 ounce of lime juice, 2 ounces or more pineapple juice, kind of to taste. I had like a little can left over, so I just used the 2 ounces. But if you got like an 8-ounce can, screw it, just dump the whole thing in. 1 ounce of a mango margarita mix, oh no, I put way too much grenadine in mine.
Oh, this may kill me, folks.
Grenadine is just sugar water. Just like 1/2 ounce of grenadine. You could probably do less than that, really. 2 dashes of bitters and just a couple dashes of absinthe. Just throw that in a mixer with some ice, shake that up well, and then strain it into an ice-filled glass. And if you want to get fancy, maybe float the Campari or maybe some high-proof rum like a 151 on top of the drink, and garnish with a mint sprig and a cherry. I forgot the cherry. Jesus Christ. It's all downhill from that perfect opening, guys.
You could have just
Anyways,
lied.
I could have. Well, no, because then I'd be all excited to have a cherry that I don't have.
He'd know, Mike. He would know.
I'm not going to lie. Not to my fans. Not to my audience. Not to my secret admirers, if they're out there.
Now get drunk, folks.
Now get drunk, folks. So basically, I figured this whole movie's plot is Dracula trying to fix up Frankenstein's monster and swap his brains around, and that screams mad kooky science. So I should just invent my own drink. That's pretty weird and kooky and fun, right? It might not taste good, it might not work, but that's the spirit of the project. So whatever I had in my liquor cabinet got dumped into this thing. I'm about to take a big old suck on this straw. Let's see how we did. If you don't put the Campari or the absinthe in here, this might be a very fruity good drink.
Excellent. Good.
As it stands, it's not terrible, but those things seem at odds with everything else I've done.
That is the best wording of "it tastes bad" I think I've ever heard, Cody.
No, not bad. This is like a C effort. Not failing the class, but they're definitely not getting the scholarship at the end of the semester.
So, I'm not going to flee into the woods whenever he visits me in my bedroom, but I'm not exactly teaching it putting on the Ritz.
I'm gonna finish this drink, and I won't complain. It's not awful.
Okay, well then, folks at home, unlike as always, do something a little differently tonight. Don't make this drink. Just get in your car sober, go to liquor store, get something you'll like.
Or, if you're already in your car, drive past the liquor store. Keep going down the strip. Go past the Noodles and Company, go past the McDonald's, past the water tower. Once you hit all the trees, the parks, just pull in. Go find a bench. It's a little damp out, but that's okay. You won't notice. You don't care. What's it matter if your pants are a little wet? Just sit on that bench. Go stare. Go look at the trees. It's not any worse than what was going on before, was it? But what if you kept driving? What if you got back in your car? Then you just drove, and you kept going north. And eventually a guy in a customs uniform might tell you have to stop, but you don't have to stop. He's just a man. You can keep going. That sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? You could stay right here and listen to our show instead. See how I brought that back around? Boy, this is an okay drink. All right, Mike, you want to count us down?
Fucking wow. All right. Let's get into the fucking 40s wackiness, I guess, off of that. 1, 2, 3.
Bring us those classic monsters.
Old movies!
All right. So, this film was directed by Charles Barton, and this little bit of trivia was fascinating to me. So, between 1933 and 37, there was actually an Oscar award for Best Assistant Director. Charles Barton won the initial 1933 award, along with 6 other people. Because the first year here, they didn't know what they were doing. No film was attached to the award. It was just the best overall assistant director. And there was like one from each company. There was one for Paramount, Universal, MGM, United Artists, Warner Bros., RKO, and Fox.
They were really happy people were looking at a positive thing Hollywood was doing. They were just handing out awards left and right. Here, love us. Please don't read Hollywood Babylon.
I've never seen an Oscar where there's like, fuck it, 7 people can take one of these home. They all get their own. So good for him. He got the first one. The screenplay here is by Robert Lees, Frederick Rinaldo, and John Grant. There were several different versions of the script that were passed around before we ended up in this vastly different version. I'll go into that more later.
Like every versus movie ever.
Yes. The cast here, Bud Abbott, Luke Costello, Lon Chaney Jr., Bela Lugosi, and Glenn Strange playing Frankenstein's monster. The music is by Frank Skinner, cinematography by Charles Van Enger, edited by Frank Gross, released June 15th, 1948, on a budget of $792,000, pulled in $3.2 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, and even adjusted for inflation, it's not an astounding sum. But that was enough to make this one of the most successful films of 1948. Not bad considering the Universal Monster movies had really tailed off in the couple of years prior to this and were no longer box office behemoths.
Very much so. Also, before we get away from it, I do need to know for a technical reason, Cody, were those the Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein facts?
Those were the Abbott and Costello Frankenstein facts.
Okay. I can.
Derby facts.
Those are just the facts.
Okay.
And we've passed something I wanted to talk about. The movie opens with a small animated segment. It's uncredited. They think it probably was done by the Woody the Woodpecker animation team. But as a child, that section blew my mind. As like a kid, I hadn't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit yet. So in my mind, a movie was either a cartoon or was live action. And to have the two meet in the middle, even for such a brief section as that, where there's animated credits that roll into the film, was confusing to me. And my dad had to explain, when he was a kid, all movies just had a cartoon slapped in front of them. It was a fun little way to learn that directors really can just do anything they want in a film. There aren't set rules, which sometimes I still forget.
It's funny how everything's come full circle, where we've gotten from Hollywood movies opening with animated opening sequences to closing with animated end credits.
We also had a kind of weird juxtaposition here where I think a lot of people, if this were a current movie, would strike this as a flaw. But there's Lon Chaney Jr. panicking that he's about to turn into a werewolf and urgently calling long distance. Then we cut to Abbott and Costello fucking around with luggage. And it's just a night and day difference between these two segments. But I kind of love it. I mean, I can see why people would be upset here, because tonally it's two completely different films that are being duct taped together. They're not even trying to gently merge them in any way.
Well, I think that's one of the things that makes this movie work, is the comedy and the horror are so mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They're allowed to 100% do their thing without having to temper one or the other for the sake of blending. Something a lot of movies from this era were very deft at, especially like adventure comedies, where the line between the slapstick and the adventure was a complete 50-50.
Yeah, this movie would not be would be heralded as any sort of classic if the Universal monster portion of it wasn't even accidentally treated completely seriously. So it is Abbott and Costello's routine interacting with. I mean, look at that. It's King Costello on the phone, cut to even lit like it's an old Universal monster movie.
Oh yeah,
which just makes it funnier.
The moon crawling up the window blinds in the background. It's such a nice little super arch Universal touch.
It's funny how comedy really doesn't change over time in that respect. Like, this is the DNA of 1,000 YouTube mashups.
And I think it helps the movie in the long term. As much as I love the Universal Monster movies, I can't sit down and tell you that they terrify me as an adult. Like, as a kid, I was frightened of them, but as a grown man, it no longer is like, I'm horrified. The Wolfman might eat someone. Whereas the comedy bits still work as comedy bits, so if the scares falter, you still got laughs. Another thing I wanted to mention here was just get this mental picture in your head. When they were filming this movie, Abbott and Costello were known for just fucking around between takes. Like, they actually had pie fights between takes. And there would be the characters in full costume, like the Wolfman be just standing around for a couple hours while Abbott and Costello are throwing pies at each other. Apparently, Abbott and Costello were very respectful of the actors who were in makeup and did their best to not get any, like, key lime on Frankenstein.
God, could you imagine if you got pie on Dracula's spats?
I just love the mental image of Dracula having a cower in the background so he doesn't get, like, whipped cream all over his hair.
Also, real quick, I just want to say I've been here 5 years is an amazing joke.
Some of the jokes in this movie are maybe the best jokes ever committed to film, and they're in this movie.
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise, because I had never gotten around to seeing this until recently, and was very curious, like, is this going to be one of those things where I'm going to have to kind of look at it academically and say, oh yeah, that's good joke structure, like, this was very good for its time? Or is this something I'm really going to enjoy, like a Marx Brothers movie? And yeah, it totally lands on that side. Like, there's stuff in this movie that is legitimately as hilarious as it was, like, today as it was back then.
Speaking of the Marx Brothers comedies, Charles Barton actually worked as an assistant director on most of their classic films, like Horse Feathers and all those. Duck Soup, I believe, as well.
Oh, there's a certain magic to directing old comedy that is absolutely dead in today's cinema. Like, that is a lost art if there ever was one.
Well, you can see, too, there's a lot of comedy set pieces in here, which I feel like in modern-day comedy aren't as common. Modern comedy has a big push for improvisation between actors back and forth, which can be really good. But here, in just a second, we're going to see Costello on top of that crate. And to do this, the crate has to be rigged so it doesn't fall over at the wrong time. So there's a lot of pre-thought into how this joke should work and the physical comedy that goes along with it. And it's something you don't see as often. I'm thinking maybe a better comparison to modern day would be like the airbag joke from Neighbors 1 and 2.
Yeah, it really reminds you of just how reliant on spectacle even comedy was back in the day. Like in the silent era, you were nobody unless you were dangling from something like Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible movie.
Like that scene itself, I wonder how they did some of that. Like I think they probably had Costello in shoes that were just like drilled into the box so he didn't fall over at the wrong time, and they just had to hope that the wires holding the box weren't gonna like go slacking at the wrong moment and send him pummeling into the ground.
Considering how often actors in these movies would almost die, that's very likely.
So
Also,
I belong to two
say,
unions is such a good joke.
It's a very good line. It's a fantastic line. And the commitment there, too. I work for 2 unions, and that stupid pouty lip he does. Costello has no fear of just putting on a stupid face or performance. He'll yap like a dog. He'll run around like an idiot. He has no problem appearing as the ultimate coward throughout this film, as Abbott has to be the ultimate straight man. They both do their roles extremely well. There's so much dedication from both sides, and you can tell there's not a lot of kind of blending between them. It's not like Abbott is sitting there thinking, how can I be the funny guy in this scene? It's more, how can I feed Costello so he can be the funniest possible in this scene?
Old comedy duos have the most amazing symbiosis in the world. It's like watching something beautiful in nature. I was like, can I just say, there is nothing I want more in this life than to eventually be the cantankerous owner of an old-timey house of horrors.
Watching these films, it made me grow up thinking I was going to get a lot more of them in my life. Like every town just had a house of horrors.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Was that a fad of the 40s and they just went away?
Where's our Pandemonium Shadow Show?
Exactly. I want to be in the tourist trap.
All these old movies which I grew up on, especially this one, like watching this with my grandfather and shit when I was young, gave me such a watching old Universal movies or old movies in general gave me such a weird, incorrect view of what the world was like. Like these kind of places just existed.
I'm telling you,
everything was a wide open space with stuff in the background.
Yeah.
Wax museums were probably super popular in the 40s, is all I'm getting out of this. I'm no historian, so I can't say if that's true or not, but I feel like it's got to be a remnant from history.
Also, this is what just a job was like to me when I was young as well.
You just put moved boxes.
Yeah.
I reminded of that John Mulaney joke about growing up thinking that quicksand was going to be a much bigger problem than it eventually ended up being. It's amazing the weird cartoon version of the world you have in your head when you're a kid.
Yeah, as a kid, this was one of the first Universal Monster movies I actually saw. So our library decided to get a bunch of VHS tapes and rent them out to people. And they had a small selection of the Universal Monster movies, which my parents thought, oh, yeah, he can handle those. We'll just rent him monster movies. So there was Dracula, Frankenstein, I believe Bride of Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and this. So I didn't have any Invisible Man movies growing up or any of the Frankenstein sequels really past the first one. This was the sequel in my mind to all the other movies because I didn't have House of Dracula or House of Frankenstein or any of those to watch first. Not that it matters. The continuity isn't all that strong between this and the previous entries, but it's kind of fascinating to think that this is the Avengers of the Universal Monster series. There were no previous meetups. This is the first time they're all in the same room.
Then Vincent Price is Thanos. That's a weird thought. That. Your Invisible Man is the Invisible Man from the last scene of this movie.
Yeah. Also, you can kind of think of this in terms of Avengers. The Wolfman, despite being popular, really only had his one solo movie. After that, he was always paired up in stuff like House of Frankenstein or House of Dracula or Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He's the Hulk. He kind of appears in other people's movies as the popular character on the side. And I guess that makes Frankenstein Iron Man? Is that... Okay, so Dracula then is Captain America?
I would say so. Frankenstein was the goddamn foundation of this universe. That's
Oh
why
yeah.
that's why he's in the title, despite being a goon.
Well, and he got the most direct follow-up sequels too.
Which stayed quality for way longer than you'd think.
Oh yeah.
It's always fascinated me how Lon Chaney Jr. is the fucking centerpiece that connects so many of these movies. Like, that's the guy who was like, no, I'll be Robert Downey Jr. I'll be the Wolfman forever.
Yeah, he was always the Wolfman. I mean, he's gone on record as saying, "Oh, that's my baby." It's just kind of surprising because Universal had no problems with recasting. When they couldn't get Karloff back, they just threw Glenn Strange in his place. Bella Lugosi kind of jumped around there too. Kind of a fun point. This is only the second time he played Dracula. He played like Dracula knockoffs in several other films, but this is the second canon Dracula appearance as Bela Lugosi, which so weird.
It's very strange when you stop and think about it. Yeah.
If someone hadn't told me that at some point in my life, I would have just assumed he had played Dracula in like 30 movies.
I know, right? God, have you guys ever heard about what the original plan for Dracula's daughter was?
I'm sure I have, but you're going to have to refresh my memory.
That movie was going to open with a prologue with Bela Lugosi as pre-vampire warlord Dracula, as fucking Dracul, who was going to raid a village and steal all of its virgins for his harem, except for one whom he adopted as his daughter, and who would later share the curse of vampirism. And then it was going to cut forward to Dracula's daughter. And they ended up just completely scrapping that. So that was going to be the other time Lugosi played Dracula. We were going to get his origin.
That really would have been amazing.
Yeah, that original movie is like one of the greatest films never made. I'm obsessed with it.
That sounds incredible.
So, because he would have had like long hair and a Fu Manchu or something. Like Bella would have sank his teeth into that. That one, Cody.
Sunk his teeth.
What's tension?
Bela Lugosi. Good.
I got to give you one.
Thank you. So as long as we're
talking
talking
Avengers
about,
Assemble for this team up.
As long as we're talking about versions of movies that never came to be, boy, were the early drafts of this one wacky. So on the DVD commentary for this film, they go over one of the original drafts, which Abbott Costello hated, by the way. The original idea was that all the original monsters were going to be dead and would have to be revived somehow. But they would be revived by lunch foods. So salt and vinegar would somehow revive Frankenstein, and baked beans would somehow revive the Wolfman, and Dracula would still need to have the stake removed from his heart. Somehow Abbott Costello would be having lunch inside of a room with the corpses of all three monsters as part of the design of the evil villain of the piece, Dr. Fell. And naturally, they would happen to get all the foods on the monsters to revive them, and they would pull the stake out of Dracula's heart so they could steady their wobbly lunch table. And that was going to be the premise for getting all the monsters back to life. They were just going to get covered in food. Then at the end of the movie, through some wacky mad science, all the monsters would be shrunk down to 4-inch tall versions of themselves, which Abbott Costello would then capture and then take on a wildly successful Broadway play series, where they would just show the monsters off like King Kong. But they're warned that if they ever expose the monsters to olives, the monsters will return to their normal size and fury. So, of course, the movie ends with like Costello sloppily eating a deli sandwich with olives. And that's your tease, your sting, the end ? Moment. I'm almost sad we didn't get that version because it sounds like the most insane thing they could have done.
To be honest, Abbott and Costello touring with mini versions of the Universal monsters having been shrunk down due to some sort of scientific magics is the greatest thing I've ever heard.
I wish you
Mini
could see my
Dracula.
face right now.
I mean,
Also,
it is kind of a nice callback to Bride of Frankenstein.
It is.
True. Also, I just want to say, I think this scene, this entire sequence, is the best acting of Bela Lugosi's career. Particularly the close-up with the one eyebrow raised.
Not that I would ever want the Universal Monster movies to be colorized, but I was doing some reading on this, and it was mentioned that on set, it was a different experience for the actors, because Bela Lugosi, in costume, was a totally different persona than his, actual self. But his eyes were a bright blue, and apparently when he was doing his intense hypno stare, it was even more effective because you'd have those bright blue peepers staring at you. And I would imagine when you're acting across from Frankenstein, it's less scary and more funny because the makeup they're using on him is like a really off-putting, funky color.
Yeah,
so it shows up
especially this
properly in
makeup.
black and white. Or like the Wolfman has Yak's hair and like foam rubber glued to his face, which on Blu-ray you can kind of see some of the creases on. So in person, I'm sure it's way more obvious. This is one of those things where sometimes it might be a little better to have the low res DVD quality thing going on. Still some fantastic work. I would never be able to do anything that good.
What's amazing is while Lugosi was looking at you, they were still shining a fucking light in his eyes, so it's even more mesmerizing.
Okay, if you listen closely in the background, there's a kind of sound effect for Dracula's hypnotism that as a child, my parents bought some sort of Halloween decoration. It was this witch that had a cauldron she was stirring, and inside the cauldron were like 3 different colored lights, and there was some light paper on top of them and a little fan. When you turn this thing on, the witch would stir the cauldron, the fan would blow, so the paper would move and kind of reflect the lights differently, and that noise played, that would play. And if you just turn that thing on and left it until the batteries ran out, you would just hear that noise on loop for hours. We put it out every Halloween. The same exact fucking sound. So I can't help but hear that sound and immediately start tripping nostalgic.
It's beautiful.
Glenn Strange or my story?
Both.
Yeah.
So I love excited to get his Amazon package Dracula here. Oh boy, it's game.
Here's a question. Why is Lugosi the only one who ever held his cape that way?
And he is really into holding his cape that way. Like
He's
90%
like a
of the
villain.
movie. Yeah, 90% of this movie is Lugosi holding that cape over his nose. As long as we're talking about monster portrayals, I've been fascinated by Frankenstein's monster and how pop culture perceived him versus how he really came across in like his first 4 movies. Frankenstein didn't start doing his whole arms stretched out, straight-legged stumbling bit until one of the later movies introduced the idea that Igor, played by Bela Lugosi, had his brain transplanted into the monster, and the monster was struck blind.
Yeah.
Before that, he moved around very normally. He only started doing this walk because in that movie he was blind, and then every movie since then just picked up that storyline, didn't explain it, and ran with it. In this one, Frankenstein can clearly see. He just freaked out because he was scared of seeing Costello. But they kept the blind, stumbling walk. And in pop culture, all the portrayals of Frankenstein are this version.
There's something beautiful about the fact that people technically remember Lugosi's Frankenstein better than Karloff's.
Right? Or another thing, like I just mentioned Igor, played by Bela Lugosi. But everyone remembers an Igor character, the mad hunchback assistant, which is very, very different than what Lugosi actually portrayed in the movie. It's a different character name. It's a different profession. It's like a 100% different thing, and yet everyone thinks they remember that character. I can't even remember where that originated from. I can only assume people just did impersonations of Lugosi's character, and enough of those changed over time where eventually everyone just settled on this weird half form of what he did.
I think the first appearance was Mad Monster Party, wasn't it? Of like traditional Igor.
Probably.
Think. It's just like it's cultural telephone. Like,
Yes.
since people saw this thing like once, and then they just start combining things in their head, and then it just becomes osmosis, and as the osmosis is then parodied in other things on TV and whatnot.
I'm sorry, we're now seeing one of my favorite Universal locations. This
Greatest
giant swamp
goddamn
tower
castle
with an
ever.
animated bat flying into it. That was, I believe, a glass matte painting. Because later on there'll be like footage of a boat paddling towards it, so they had to interplay live action elements and the actual background mats.
I love how Dracula is just Magneto in this movie. He technically has an island fortress.
This island fortress has it all, really, though. It's got watery, spooky docks, hidden doors. The whole thing is a giant, spooky castle. It has a mad science lab at the top. They put in like 6 evil layers into one location.
And let's face it, the Frankenstein monster is just Batman and Robin Bane.
Yeah. So weird the
also,
monster
look at Dracula
spoke
still
again.
knocking. One of many reasons this movie's continuity makes no sense if you try to tie it in with Universal. So I like to think that this takes place solely in the Abbott and Costello universe.
I mean, does that even technically work? They had an Invisible Man movie, but it doesn't use Vincent Price.
Oh yeah, even
Or
the Abbott and Costello sequels have like nothing to do with one another.
Right. I'm pretty sure they're not even playing the same characters.
They're not. I'm so mad that they didn't reuse Price though. So because Price's performance in The Invisible Man was delightful.
Could you imagine him trading barbs with Bud and Lou?
And the thing was, since he appeared at the end of this, that means he was briefly the branded Invisible Man in Universal's eyes. But then when they came around to reusing him for Abbott and Costello, it just went in a different direction.
It's weird to think he's the Mark Ruffalo. Also, God, how delightful is it to see Bela Lugosi like finally comfortable with the English language and playing a articulate, like super charming Dracula who gets to monologue like he's Doctor Doom.
And has on a fantastic white bat bow tie.
Dracula's outfit's spectacular.
He's so stylish. Wearing the first Dracula ring that would later be copied by Christopher Lee. My favorite factoid in the world.
I'm kind of amused here that this is called Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because obviously Frankenstein is a big draw of the Universal monsters. But Frankenstein has such a small role in this film. I'm pretty sure the Wolfman gets the most screen time, most interaction with the characters.
Yeah. Frankenstein is mostly asleep.
Yeah, and when he's walking around, it's all stuff like, oh, we need to recharge his batteries.
And what's weird is whenever this movie didn't originally have Abbott and Costello in the title, it was still Frankenstein. It was the brain of Frankenstein.
Which, I mean, is a more apt title, because that is the plot. They're trying to switch out Frankenstein's brain.
It would be so weird to think of this movie as technically a branded Frankenstein movie. Technically the follow-up to House.
I mean, the House movies were pretty wacky already, just finding different ways for Dracula to revive Frankenstein and fight the Wolfman.
I feel
That's
so
kind
bad
of the amazing
for
thing
Wolfman.
for me.
Just having been revived in the previous movie, just to come back to being a goddamn Wolfman in this.
He's cured for a little while.
Ah, jeez. I mean, you can't say it's not the most Wolfman thing in the world.
Going off of this, I've mentioned this book to you guys before, but I have to keep mentioning it because I'm pretty sure if I stop talking about it, it'll phase out of existence.
Oh.
In 1998, Universal commissioned like 3 sequel novels to be written by various authors about the Universal monsters. And the first one that came out was Return of the Wolfman, which is a direct sequel to this movie. I want to get a copy of this book so I can reread. I haven't read it since I was probably like 10. But it's something like $50 for a used copy off Amazon these days because for some reason it's not in steady print. But the idea of it is, spoilers for the end of the film, the Wolfman, after he grabs Dracula and tumbles into the ocean, neither of them are killed by this because why would the ocean kill either of those guys? So Dracula just flies away. The Wolfman swims to shore, sees Abbott and Costello madly paddling away in their boat, and then he murders the main scientist who survives this movie with the leading lady. Talbot transforms back into a man, realizes he's killed again, and is so distraught he has the girl help him commit suicide with a silver-backed piece of mirror, and then hide his body in the basement of this lab, where he remains until like 1998. The book happens in the modern era. A new person inherits the castle. The government demands that they break open the basement for appraisal purposes. They do so. They disturb the body. The Wolfman comes back and kills a bunch of people. They eventually, if I remember right, go to Dracula's new island in like Jamaica, where he has a bunch of voodoo zombies hoarding sugarcane for him or something weird. And there's
white
a
zombie
fight.
reference.
Yeah, and there's like a fight between Dracula and these new people and the Wolfman. It's the most fanficky thing I have ever read. Even as like an 8-year-old, I'm like, this guy's a big fan of these source movies. Maybe a little too much.
Could all that be added as a postscript to this movie?
I would love it more than anything in the world if Universal went insane one day and just gave $5 million to somebody to shoot a sequel to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. That is that book. Like, word for word, they just made that book into a movie and just decided to do a direct sequel to this film from 1948.
Oh, they just deep fake Chaney in there? It's in black and white?
Oh my god, yes. If I was Bill Gates rich, that's what I would do with my money.
Oh, look at Costello there defending the honor of the Wolfman. I'm still waiting for them to do a remake of this and bring back Benicio del Toro.
Could you imagine if we ever get to that point? Like the Dark Universe takes off enough where it runs out of steam one day and they have to resort to comedy versions?
Jay and Silent Bob Meet Frankenstein.
I'd watch it.
Oh, actually, that's when they finally sequelized Pineapple Express. Those two characters interacting with Universal Monster Remix.
I would love that even more.
God, I would be so... I'm mad at myself for saying that, and now it's not going to happen.
Maybe 21 Jump Street can finally get into another series.
That I'd be down for. I'm sure Miller and Lord have pitched that.
Miller and Lord pitching a movie where it's the Universal monsters against cops.
21 Transylvania.
I would legitimately watch that. That's not even a concern of mine. If any studio heads are listening to this podcast, go ahead, greenlight that one. It's fine. I'm not even asking for royalties.
Also, God, it's so disturbing to see the Wolfman about to strangle Lou Costello. Like, the implication of that is really dark.
He's been trying to murder Costello for the entire film. They have another scene later in the jungle where Costello's just bumbling around and all the Wolfman wants to do is rip his throat out.
Like, could you imagine how sad that would be? Just a dead Lou Costello in the mist with just gore between his chin and his chest. Just ripped apart like fucking Pinhead got to him. His last scream still etched on his face. A single last word unheard.
I'm pretty sure that's how he died.
Okay, this dude's
McDougal?
This dude's H.H. Holmes, right?
I assume.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to my murder mansion.
Now that would have been a twist. That should have been Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer.
I mean, there is kind of the hint in this one that he is the new Wolfman. Well, which imagine that sequel. This guy comes back as the Wolfman because they killed off Larry Talbot finally.
Him and Hugo Weaving. This is what I love, though, is this This is the Wolfman movie where he actually fucking bites somebody, like goes for the jugular and shit.
Yeah, although I don't think we actually see an ounce of blood on the screen. They do a good job
Not
of
at
putting
all.
hands and stuff around it.
But, you know, they do reference it.
Again, on the commentary track, they mentioned that when this movie came out, they had a surprise screening for it to get opinions, and the vast majority were very positive. But they received 2 very negative cards from 2 women that said this movie had destroyed Abbott and Costello for their children. Which fascinates me. People saw this in 48 and they thought this was too goddamn scary and violent for children to enjoy.
This movie was banned in several countries. I think Australia had to cut out the monsters entirely and just make an Abbott and Costello movie.
That's what the reporting is. Pretty much any scene with a monster had to be stripped out, which I don't know what you're left with for a movie at that point.
That.
I don't know how you can make anything coherent out of that.
That would be so abstract.
See, I want to see the opposite. I want to see the all monster cut. That's just a serious goddamn movie with supervillain Dracula.
I mean, it does function as pretty much a universal movie just fine if you were to cut out all the Abbott and Costello scenes. And even then, look back to Bride of Frankenstein. There were tons of really over-the-top comedy moments that Wales threw in there. So it's not that out of the realm of possibility that, you know, this just blends in with the other films.
Yeah, that's what I love about this movie, like tone-wise. It honestly just feels like you're watching a Universal monster movie where they ran into some funny dudes.
Don't you just want to watch the movie where, well, Talbot is essentially like a private secret agent monster fucking trying to stop Dracula around the world?
Oh, Midnight Detective Wolfman. My favorite thing about this movie. Being John Constantine.
I think the important detail we're all missing, though, what's going on with Abbott's tie?
Okay, so you're obsessed with Abbott's tie as well?
Look at that weird monstrosity of a tie. Is that how ties were in the 40s?
It looks like it's tucked into his belt.
Maybe. I think it's just flat. I think it just ends without a point.
He looks like a Dick Tracy villain.
A lot. It's the high-waisted pants and the black button-up.
Yeah.
Jesus, that is up to his tits.
These guys need to put on some sport coats. So as long as we're talking about how the fashion of the 40s doesn't line up to my expectations of fashions today, I saw an article online last week talking about how the act of watching a silent film is much like drinking a whiskey. You know, if you've never drunk before, you don't just start off with like a giant glass of Lafroig. You got to work your way into it. And the same is true with silent movies. People have a hard time watching them these days because they're so far removed from what they've been taught is cinema. And I think a lot of the same concepts apply to black and white films. If you were to try and show this to, I don't know, let's say I took a copy of this home, tried to show it to my niece and nephew, I don't think they would sit for the whole thing. It'd be a very weird experience for them. They'd probably think it was slow and boring, and they'd be thrown off by the fact that it's in black and white. I feel like you almost have to train people to get into these films because they operate on such a different level. One, just not having color to guide you through things. Two, the acting in these films. You know, in the 70s, we had that big push towards more kind of realistic acting. Whereas here, it's you know, you can do this spitfire, over-the-top, quick talk, yell, shout kind of thing, and it's more acceptable. It's more stage acting than in movie acting as we've come to know it. It's just kind of a bummer because there's so many times I want to show people an old black and white film, and you can tell like they're playing along, but they're not having a good time. And I need a way to brainwash people into thinking it's all fun.
That's always such a disappointing experience. Like, oh, you're not getting the same thing out of this than I am. You're just confused. It's like you're showing someone a boring documentary.
That's it. Like they're trying to be nice and sitting there to watch it, but they're not having fun. Which is even worse. I'd rather have them not watch the movie I love than to have them watch it and hate it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can explain to them. It's like trying to explain a color to somebody. Like, you either just get it or you don't.
Yeah. So anyways, that article I was reading was saying that you just have to find the most accessible versions of those types of films and just slowly get people to get into them. Like if you're going to get people into silent films, you start them off with like the Chaplin comedies or the Lloyd comedies, because the physical comedy there still plays, and people will get into it, and it'll be just fine. And then eventually, maybe you get them to like Metropolis. You just don't start with the heavy stuff first. I don't know what the equivalent would be for black and white. Maybe like some Three Stooges stuff.
Hey, all of us began on a diet of Three Stooges when we were but fetuses. That's one of my favorite things about movies from this era, their otherworldliness. Excuse me. Where even the most banal of films just feels like it's from another dimension because of the way people move and speak and the way everything is structured.
Yeah, you might as well be watching Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
The way the camera setups work. I mean, look at this. This is mostly we plant the camera, people walk through the shot. We plant the camera somewhere else, they walk through the shot. Compare this to something insane like the Lord of the Rings, where they had hundreds of millions of dollars to film, and they have a digital camera that can fly through digital landscapes. Think of Gandalf falling down, fighting the Balrog, and the insane camera work that goes with that, and how far we've advanced over the last 50 plus years. So I can see why people aren't necessarily into black and white old movies, but it just makes me sad.
You're just pushing the colorblind agenda, aren't you?
Maybe. I'm still very bitter about in one of my college classes we had to watch Halloween, and some people complained that the movie was too old and boring, and I just wanted to start strangling people. That was Halloween. That one was in color even. I can't imagine how they deal with like the thing from another world.
Oh, I remember I was at it was like some kind of like get together like around Halloween time, like family thing. People were staying over stuff. I don't remember when this was. It's like maybe like 13 or something. And we put on, since it was around Halloween, put on Night of the Living Dead. And like 20, 30 minutes into it, it was like, let's turn this off. This is too cheesy.
No!
My soul just shattered into a million pieces that night. I never recovered.
I remember when that happened. You were sending me texts.
Local man burns down house. Nothing of value lost.
Oh, God. There's no good in the world anymore. How can I look these people in the face tomorrow?
It might just be a point of introduction. If those people had seen Night of the Living Dead when they were like 10, they'd probably be into it. I know for me, I watched the Universal Monster movies very young, so Dracula was terrifying to me. But if you watch Dracula now, if you went in cold, like you hadn't seen it until you were 30, I don't think anything about that movie would really be terrifying to an adult. Especially if they had been seeing current movies all that time. Or
here's the weird thing. I was the youngest person in the room.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they hadn't seen Night of the Living Dead when they were young. Maybe they just never got around to it. That was a 60s film.
True, but you think you'd understand what movies were like when you were a kid.
No.
God damn it. They're still demons, and I hate them.
Mike will not let this go. That's the reason we're gathered here today.
It's been over 10 years, so...
By the way, the Wolfman just got a line on Dracula and the Frankenstein monster.
And look at that wild tie.
Okay, is it just me? Or does Lon Chaney Jr. always sound like he's doing a racist Native American voice as Talbot?
Now and again.
I hadn't considered that.
Just odd, because that's not how Chaney talked.
That was his professional acting voice. Or maybe his drunk voice. I don't know. It's always disappointing and very sad to hear about these films because, one, this is a comedy and it's fun. It's wacky fun. And then you hear, oh, yeah, and Abbott and Costello would constantly fight on set, and they treated the other co-members of the production as garbage, and everyone hated them. Also, they were all drunks.
Yeah, Lon Chaney was not a fun dude to be around.
Yeah, he had a serious alcohol dependency problem, and he would tell people, hey, you've got to get all your shots by 4 p.m. because I'm going to be gone after that. every
Very
single day. He would
sad.
just drink himself to oblivion. And Costello had a lot of health issues. I'm sorry, Abbott had a lot of health issues. Apparently, he had issues with seizures and would treat it by drinking. So he would often have problems too, where he wouldn't have the stamina to go an entire day without getting drunk because he was dealing with all sorts of other problems.
And God knows Lugosi was not having fun working with the dude who Universal decided was their golden boy and had replaced him at one point.
And
And
I don't
Cheney
even.
was just a dick back. So,
And I don't know
a
when.
very Batman Forever set there.
Although the interviews that they gave, nothing was too terrible. Apparently, the director had a very good working relationship with Costello, where Costello would actually try some of his ideas out on set, which he wouldn't do with most directors. So that was at least good. They were mostly good to each other on the set, although Abbott and Costello apparently would argue all the time, and Costello was pretty easy to piss off and would fly into a rage at pretty much any opportunity.
Yeah, he was pretty psychologically damaged from the death of his son by the time they filmed this, so everybody who knew him said he was a completely different person.
On a brighter note, boy, this is one of my favorite Universal sets.
It's amazing how legitimately good the production values of this are, despite this being one of the cheapest movies they made from this era.
Right?
Yeah,
and this was the last Universal monster movie, truly. Well, unless you count stuff like the Creature from Black Lagoon series, which I guess I do. But this was the last Frankenstein and Wolfman and all that.
This was our OG era.
Yeah, but they still went to all the trouble to mimic the lighting, the special effects, the set designs of those original films, which makes it work so well. God, I seriously love this. We have the smoke coming out of the floor. We have the rotating door. If you go back out to the other side of this set, it's got those creaky, weird docks that go down to the ocean. It all works so well.
One thing that's always been brought up in regards to this movie, and really all the Abbott and Costello Meet the Monsters Derby films, is the great thing about them is the monsters are never really the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
That's what really makes them work.
There's a little bit with the Wolfman in a later scene that they kind of pants him, but by and large, I agree.
And it's the Wolfman, so he's there to be the butt of the joke.
Speaking of the monsters being involved in jokes, again, this one isn't really making fun of Frankenstein. It's just how dumb Costello is.
Yeah.
But I love the history of this scene where Costello didn't want to do it. He thought this was stupid. He didn't get the idea of multiple hands. It just didn't read right to him on page. The director begged him to do it. And then when he was doing it, Glenn Strange found it so goddamn funny they had to do like 15 takes or something because he kept laughing every time Costello would try something out.
Look at him, look at him.
There's apparently a version somewhere online you can find where he's actually like ruining the set completely and they had to stop filming because he was laughing. Somehow that deleted footage survived and was archived and put online. Again, Costello, I love the fearlessness in how he portrays his character. There's like no shame here. He squeals like a little pig. He runs around. He's pretty much useless in most situations.
Oh, that is the lineage of the Hollywood funny fat man. You leave it all on the table.
It's just fantastic that he has no concerns about his own image here. He's perfectly fine being the horse's ass. And for as much as we talk about physical performances, man, you got to give his vocal range credit too.
and speaking in a completely affected voice too, which is so impressive. Hey!
Quick cape action!
I want to know what the hell Dracula was doing there.
I don't know. He was like fiddling with a candle. Maybe there's a thermostat back there and he's mad about the wasting power.
Quickly!
Like, if you take the comedy away from this, it's actually kind of a terrifying scene. Two monsters slowly approaching you.
That dead serious bombastic score. Ooh.
I love that Dracula is just kind of like, oh, I guess this is what we're doing now.
Skinner did the Wolfman score, didn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell because Universal kind of had an in-house style for their monster movies where they all relied really heavily on the same kind of stingers.
Yeah, it's hard to
Just
pin down
stingers
any
and
composer from back then, really.
Like there was a mode they were working in where I don't think they were trying to be too far out. So a lot of the scores kind of blend into each other. Not to discredit the guys making them. I'm sure that was just kind of the idea of, hey, you're not here to put your own unique stamp on the score. We need something that's effective and gets people in the seat to eat popcorn or possibly throw it in the air.
I too have this book in my desk.
Chapter 1 of the Diary of Victor Frankenstein. April the 22nd. I
Frankenstein
think Elizabeth
caused
likes me.
so many problems by writing his thoughts down, and he shouldn't have journaled anything. That's like the plot of 3 different Frankenstein movies. Ah, we found the writing of Frankenstein. I wonder if this will cause problems. Yes, it will.
Yeah, whatever happened to dying in the Arctic, Frankenstein?
Imagine if they did this in a modern day version, it'd just be his MySpace page.
The
Just his
vlogs
YouTube
of
videos,
Frankenstein.
fucking blogging the creation of Frankenstein's monster.
Instead of his top 8 friends, it'd just be his top 8 body parts lined up.
It's amazing to look at stuff like this and think about just how little comedy has changed over the years, especially kids comedy from our generation. Like the classic golden age, like vaudeville comedy duo has persisted, not just throughout film history, but like throughout just the history of fiction. And it seems like a fairly recent invention as far as storytelling goes. Like it is pretty much created from vaudeville. And it's weird, like you look at stuff like Kenan and Kel and Drake and Josh and whatever the hell fetuses watch now. Like that stuff is super boiled down, like old comedy with a fresh coat of paint.
I don't know. I feel like kids today, obviously, they have some of that stuff, a lot of that stuff. But some of the other things out there were pretty different as far as comedy goes. We've got things like The Regular Show, Adventure Time. Most of the animated cartoons are miles and miles different than any of the comedy that you would have seen back in the 40s.
Oh, it's definitely changed and branched out. I just mean like it's weird how
The comedy
very
duo
specific
and
tropes, still
the DNA.
persist. In an art like archetypes and such. And I would definitely say like Mordecai and Rigby, that they're an old timey comedy duo. Tall, skinny guy, short, fat guy.
That's
Yep.
true.
One's
They
nice,
do
one's a
fall into
dick.
that. I mean, they both have their dickish moments.
And even back then, there were still, I mean, look at the animated comedy stuff that existed around this time. There's all kinds of different portions. Also, while that's a very good point, I think we would be remiss if we just let Dracula's robe pass us by here without
we
comment.
were all
Count
thinking about it.
Dracula.
I want that.
Like, if
Big
I could-
Daddy D.
If I could boil down what I want my life to be in a robe, it's Dracula's robe.
Dracula's robe on his 6-part Evil Lair Island.
I like it when they call me Big Papa.
What I love is this means he packed it.
I mean, he probably has several coffins with him at all times, so I imagine he probably has the other ones just, filled with his spare clothes.
It's sad to think whenever you kind of see Lugosi in this movie, this is kind of the this is around the downturn of him returning to Dracula and all that, and which is great. But it's
his
also
last
like
major role.
Yeah, it's also like, oh. It's like it's so impressive he's just giving it his all, and it shows so much about Lugosi, but Just knowing, like, shortly thereafter where things were going.
Right.
Well, God, same for Bud and Lou. I mean, this was their last major hit. This was the end of the traditional Universal system. This is Swan Song, the movie.
Yeah, Chaney,
Universal
same
at this point
thing.
was trying to do everything they could to get rid of what they didn't think of as like prestige pictures, which was a terrible idea. Obviously, they would come back to horror pretty quick, but they're trying to downsize comedy, which is also weird because Abbott and Costello produced like dozens of smash hits for Universal, so it's very weird to see them kind of being kicked out the door.
God, it's fucked up to think. Wait, what? 10 years later, all of this would be on syndication, and horror would become beloved by kids, and we'd get another return.
It is funny. This is like the end of so many. Well, I mean, a lot of them that did continue on, of course, like Abbott and Costello and whatnot. But it's kind of the end of so many things, except Glenn Strange. This is the beginning of him just being fucking Frankenstein.
Ah, Mr. Dark.
Old movies made me feel like there were going to be a lot more costumes of Satan out there.
Yeah,
I know.
they're
right?
everywhere.
My dream is to just walk around my town dressed as cartoon Satan.
That's a great costume. Like, I would wear that.
All right, this is a fantastic joke.
And just the timing at the end of the mask coming back down over his face as he walks away. Do you think that was intentional or just good luck?
That's 50-50.
Because, I mean, like, I'm sure they could have set the costume up where if you nod his head forward a little bit, it would come down. Or they maybe could have put, like, a wire on or something. But I feel like it must have just been kind of fortune, or they just crossed their fingers that it was going to happen again.
Since he's on screen, damn, is it always impressive to see just how fucking good Chaney was as Talbot.
With the only thing he ever really excelled at.
Yeah.
Like his weird anti-charisma works so well for this character. It's a shame. Like sometimes you look at actors, especially in the golden age, and you just say, some people were born in the wrong goddamn century, and Chaney was born to work in the 80s.
Yeah.
Lon Chaney Jr. is basically the living version of a national song. And I love him for it. But to look at him more seriously, he's a giant guy. Like, he towers over everyone else on set. But he always has this kind of shoulder shrugged look to him. Like, he has lost his puppy and his wife has taken the kids. He just constantly looks like he is about to crumble, even though he's the biggest guy on set. And we just saw in that last scene, when he's pushed to anger, he was a great physical actor, too. Like, he just grabbed people and could throw them around. He was strong. He was big. He could be intimidating if you wanted to be in that mode, which most times they didn't have him do, unless he was the monster. And then you kind of forget it's him because he's covered underneath so much yak hair. You lose the attachment to the actor.
God, could you imagine if he had been born at the closer to the end of the 20th century? I could easily see him having the same career as somebody like Harvey Keitel or Michael Rooker. A dude who can do prestige and also just show up as a genre heavy. It's such a fucking waste.
Let's be honest, though. If he was put into the 80s, they would just find like ways to put prosthetic makeup over him again. He would just end up being Jason Voorhees for a movie randomly.
Where is the rocket? The amount of times I've ruined parties with this, by the way.
Hey, he was old-timey Jason Voorhees. He was the mummy.
Very true. Another one of those where he wasn't the original mummy, but he played the mummy in all the spin-off follow-ups that he might as well have been the person. Like, everyone's perception of the mummy is him as the mummy.
Yeah, no one ever thinks of Karloff as the mummy.
It's weird. Chaney's just the official scab of Universal at this period.
Well,
Like
everyone is jumping on rolls. I think the Mummy were so little budgeted. They were just such B movies that they probably didn't want to get Karloff back for it. They probably didn't think they could afford him.
yeah, Karloff outgrew being that character so quickly.
Yeah, he did the 3 Frankensteins, and then he came back for the next one, but not as the monster. He's like, nah, fuck that. I'll be a mad scientist. That I can handle. That's fine.
It's weird. I think technically Karloff played Dr. Frankenstein on film more than he played a monster. Especially if you count in that odd Frankenstein movie set in modern times, I believe was filmed in like 1975.
There was a Frankenstein in the 70s. I'm blanking. I think Warner's archive just released it.
Yes, the one where he is the descendant of Dr. Frankenstein, who was recruited at Auschwitz to create a master race of Frankensteins.
Oh, interesting. So there's a movie called Frankenstein 1970 that came out in 1958. Had Boris Karloff playing the Baron's grandson, who rents the family castle to a TV crew to fund his atomic revival of the family monster.
That's the film I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was so early. It sounds so ironic in 70s.
Right, that's why I was thrown off. I mean, it is Frankenstein 1970. It just happened to be a movie made 12 years before then.
It is weird to think, like, Lon Chaney, not too good for the Wolfman, not too good to be the son of Dracula, not too good to be the Frankenstein monster. It's like, God, he got passed around that studio so much. I even believe he subbed for Strange in a couple of scenes in this, didn't he?
Yep, he's the one who does the big window scene.
Yeah,
that's
Strange broke his ankle, I think, so they had to put somebody else in the makeup for a couple of shots.
That's the weird tragedy of Chaney, is he was always in his father's shadow, like even changing his name to Junior, which he was not a junior, just for the name recognition, but he never could get that reputation as, the man of 1,000 faces, but for a while, he was Universal's Monsters.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he kind of delivered on that promise. He just didn't get the credit for it.
Yeah, the 40s were essentially him. He was the driving force between the later days of the Universal Monsters. But at that point, everyone kind of labeled them as B pictures, so I think that goes along with the idea of him not getting respect. Just imagine, if this were the current day and age, there would be some really terrible B movie that we could appreciate that would just grab every one of these guys and toss them into an unrelated picture to their previous efforts. Like, what was the one that just came out? Death House? Where they were like, fuck it, whoever we got, put the Candyman in there, put in Jason Voorhees. I don't care, just grab and put him in there.
Oh, could you imagine if Blumhouse did that? Just fucking Chris and The Tethered and Spawn in a movie. And they're battling Ma.
So there's something special about black and white jungles. I don't know what it is, but if you look at the jungle sets of King Kong or The Most Dangerous Game, this movie, they look incredibly fake but wonderful at the same time.
Oh, it's like that same thing of the real thing doesn't look right.
Exactly, yeah. The real one looks boring. This, however, I love. I absolutely adore this fake-ass jungle they're running around in, and all the man-hours it must have taken to put all these fake trees and leaves everywhere.
It's appealing because it's nature, and it's nature, and it's also somebody's house.
Yeah. And this is what I was talking about before, about how they kind of joke around on the Wolfman. Like, he keeps lunging for Costello, but he keeps missing or getting stuck in trees.
Which, again, the Wolfman's the official fuck-up of the monster universe, so getting his ass kicked by Lou Costello is appropriate.
It's just sad.
I mean, it's built into his DNA where he had these killer claws, and yet he had to strangle most of his victims.
Your neck! I got your neck!
I can't bite you on screen!
So, the makeup quality is not as, of course, good in this movie than it was, when Jack Pierce is doing it and whatnot. They're essentially just wearing masks, but I really do like the Wolfman design in this.
It's solid. It holds up.
It works pretty good. They were also trying to maximize the comfort for Lon Chaney Jr. during this period, so
Yeah.
they were making the makeup less complicated. That said, the transformation scenes were still a bitch to shoot because he would have to basically stay perfectly still for hours at a time as they glued the pieces to his face.
Just an IV of whiskey in his arm, I assume.
I mean, probably. They did say it was very uncomfortable at points because he would get a little too drunk and then they would have to try and glue stuff to his face, and he was not a happy drunk.
He just forget that he was making a movie. Get the fuck off of me.
He was drunk most of the time when he was the mummy.
Now, didn't he have like a fucking tube built into the suit to feed him alcohol?
I haven't heard that one.
That's always been it's always been the rumor, yeah. As sad as it is, I like to believe it's true.
It is ingenious in its own way.
I'm just imagining an unrelated or unreleased cut of this film where the mummy is in the film and he's also wearing one of those hats that has two beer cans on the side and tubes leading down to your mouth. Apparently the effect to make that bat fly cost the production like $150. So they could get their fishing string up in their fake bat.
So on the opposite side of the makeup, it does legitimately look like Glenn Strange is wearing a mask that's about 6 inches thick.
Oh, that VR helmet he wears.
He does not look like it. That is very comfortable.
Also, I will say, as far as the Wolfman makeup goes, anything looks like a leaps and bounds improvement over the house makeup.
Yeah.
That weird tiki mask Chaney's wearing in those movies. Oogie boogie boogie.
Dracula is now driving a boat. I just have to mention that's an image I don't think we'll see in the rest of the films.
If only we got a fucking close-up of Lugosi at the mast just laughing hysterically.
I mean, technically it goes against vampire lore, but I'm going to allow it because I love how silly that image is.
The vampire lore with water is always just, it's never consistent. It's like, it seems like they can be on boats, but also they can't be on boats, and
despite
it's never
the fact
very
that
clear.
Dracula gets to London in a fucking boat.
Yeah.
One of the most famous things he does.
It's supposed to be like they can't cross moving water under their own volition.
Yeah,
so
something
I think,
like
he can't
that.
Jump into the water and wade across it, but on a boat it's okay. It seems like it'd make more sense if he had to be in a coffin the entire time and other people had to ferry him across. But of course that doesn't work because he gets out and murders everyone on the Demeter at a certain point.
Yeah.
Unless Renfield does it all for him and just brings him the blood in the coffin.
It
but I don't
seems
think
like
that's the case.
a vampire just can't swim. Like if you're sitting on something, that's different, but you can't swim across.
Yeah.
Also, running water will kill you, so, you know.
At least according to that one Hammer Dracula.
The only time that's ever been used on film is fucking the death of Johnny Alucard.
and Night of the Demons, we can't forget.
Of course.
So this just seems like a long, complicated excuse for Dracula just never learned to fucking swim.
He's like a fucking brick. He just sinks.
I just doggy paddle.
You try swimming with a cape.
I don't want to. It's bad enough he's got those fancy shoes on.
Also, is this where the entire relationship between Chunk and Sloth comes from? Is just the same?
I think so.
I guess I wouldn't be too surprised.
So, do you agree that this entire movie is just one long Venture Brothers episode?
This is Escape to the House of Mummies, Part 3.
I do want to make a list and just tally up the comedy elements versus the horror elements to see how well balanced they are. Because right there, we just got that wonderful creaking coffin sound effect that goes in the horror branch. But we have Costello doing the joke of like trying to cover his face but also see the action at the same time. Comedy element.
That is
So I
a handsome
understand.
Frankenstein's monster. I'm going to be honest with you.
Really?
I understand why he uses the ring on the rings. I can get that, like the electricity
The
thing.
eyes.
Why did you do the eyes?
I've never
Why did
understood
you do
that.
the eyes?
Wait. Would that be an explanation for why this Frankenstein can see?
He gave
He
him
has
the power of
Dracula eyes,
I've got vamp vision.
so I can speak again. I can never get over the fact that this is where the Dracula ring came from. My favorite weird bit of Dracula lore from the Hammer films.
My grandfather used to tell me about the fucking, like when we were watching old Universal movies, to tell me about the fucking epicness of Dracula's ring. Which wasn't from anything, too, which is my favorite part looking back. Like, he was just wowing me.
Look at that ring, boy.
Just wowing me with legends he was essentially just making up off the top of his head, and I love it.
That's delightful.
This is also an interesting bit of character. Dracula starts as being goddamn Dracula in these films. Like, he's just a crusty old dude from the old country that wants to go to the new place. And by the last film in his series, he's operating complex electrical equipment to bring
It's really
back
weird.
Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein is all about progressive technology use.
Well, it's been a few years.
He's just a supervillain in this.
It really is.
To what end? I have no fucking idea.
I love so much a Bela Lugosi who's finally in on the joke.
Excellent.
At this point, Lugosi is perfectly self-aware that he is, in fact, that type of Dracula.
He just gave, like, the internet kid giving the thumbs up reaction to that assault. Just, not bad.
Also,
I like that he's finally appreciating his henchmen.
My favorite thing about that scene is the very end where where essentially Dracula goes, "Get the legs," because they're going to drag out a body together.
Even though Dracula should have the strength of 10 men.
I'm fascinated by the fact that this is essentially a noir comedy.
Yeah, we
with
got a femme
monsters.
fatale in here. Who, during the opening animation, is drawn as a vamp.
Yeah, I'm very confused by that art. Jesus.
Dump him. Whatever, we don't need that other scientist anymore.
You dum-dum.
Alright, so this castle has to have a lot of stairs, and I have no idea how they got that gurney up and down the stairs.
Oh, it must have been a nightmare.
But, again, Dracula, you've got super strength. You could probably do this just fine.
So much of a dick Dracula is. That is a good fucking line. Also, in what universe is Lou Costello 30?
He borrowed it when he was about 12.
Just a little boy at 22. I'm curious, am I the only one who always misremembers this movie as Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman because of Alvin and the Chipmunks?
Oh.
I think I had that problem when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too. Although Alvin and Chipmunks also met Frankenstein like a year before Werewolf came out.
That is true.
Or it might have been the other way around. Those two movies came out like 1 year of each other.
Yeah, I don't know why they decided to resurrect that trope for direct-to-video Alvin and the Chipmunks movies. Briefly.
Hey, science man, we're off that concussion.
Also, I just want to say, I can't believe we've gotten almost to the end of this commentary and not pointed out. We've gotten this far and not pointed out. We're watching, essentially, the birth of Scooby-Doo.
Oh, yeah. God damn it, I love that. Take a left, and then runs immediately into a wall with no hesitation. It's so stupid, but so well executed. it's very strange to me to think that, as we were saying before, this looks so much like a Universal monster movie when it's set in not always a very typical monster movie spot. Most of the Wolfman stuff was, like weird castles and I don't know what country or time. Frankenstein, again, more spooky castles. Dracula, castles. This one has a castle, but there's also a giant jungle element. They're down in the swamp for a big portion of this.
This is more of like an adventure movie setting.
Yeah, but yet it feels like it should. This definitely feels like it belongs with all the other ones. Hey, it's that spooky witch noise again. Hello, childhood.
We're about to see the spooky space kook.
This is probably the most powerful Draculas in any of the movies.
Again, he's just Doctor Doom by this time.
He really could have done a lot more other than try and bring Frankenstein back. I'm not even sure what the end goal is for having Frankenstein back on his team.
Lift things, I guess. It's very confusing.
Like, he never goes into depth of what he's going to do with having a super strong henchman. And it's going to be a super strong henchman with the brain of Costello. Originally, this scene was going to be much sillier, and Dracula was going to use his powers to levitate a rock that Costello was sitting on, and the rock would fly back into the cave. Apparently, Costello didn't like the scene, and it would have been too expensive, so they just decided to have him skip back into the castle for jokes.
I like that briefly Dracula was going to have telekinesis.
Right? That would have been a weird wrinkle. I don't know why he never uses Jedi powers earlier.
Not that any version of Dracula has well-defined powers.
Very true.
I love this.
My God, Stoker's Dracula is just Satan, essentially.
Oh man, this is so cool. The Tesla coils, all that electricity.
All the lightning. I
and
love
in the
her
middle,
Mad Doctor
Bela
outfit.
Lugosi. And in the middle, Bela Lugosi as branded Dracula is cackling.
Like if I could go to an afterlife, this would be my Valhalla.
I like how down to action everyone goes from all this other fucking around. We finally get into this scene. There's a lion tamer action beat with Dracula who just starts charging at this guy.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
Dracula's shock at Abbott's stupidity is always very amusing.
The evil doctor gets taken out like Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi. Boba Fett? Where?
Oh no, but I've been a good boy. I've said my prayers at night.
He just forgets that this is going to happen.
I always like the implication in old Wolfman movies that you could technically not transform into a werewolf if you just forgot that there was a full moon out.
It's like cartoon logic, like looking down from a cliff whenever you're walking off the edge.
Just don't look. Just don't look. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
So you think that Talbot gets out of staying late at parties by being like, oh, I'd love to stick around and help clean up, but in a half hour the moon will rise.
Lock me up.
He's a real party animal. Ho!
This is all very silly.
What, just because he's on a spinning cart that won't stop for anyone?
Okay, do you guys have the problem of your brain wanting to believe that this is Herman Munster?
Oh, God, yeah.
He and Gwen look so similar, like my head auto-corrects it as the same guy.
I could, yeah, definitely.
This is the origin of Herman.
Yeah, can we just say Strange's Frankenstein is officially Herman Munster, like it's his origin?
Also,
Sometimes
holy
that is
shit,
better.
this is my favorite shot in probably any Universal monster movie. Like, the visceralness of this fucking shot is incredible. There's nothing like it in any of them.
Tosses her out of the room.
Like, for the time, that's insane that they did that.
And Frankenstein's the only one in this movie to get an actual goddamn kill. The Wolfman maims one man, kind of. Frankenstein actually murders a dude, and Dracula doesn't do anything.
And that's Frankenstein's signature move, throwing people into things.
Oh, he loves it. A classic joke. It weirds me out. If you watch old comedies, they didn't have a lot of issues with just remixing old jokes. Like at the start of this film, there is the bit about a candle on top of Dracula's coffin, and Dracula keeps opening the coffin, and the candle keeps sliding down the coffin. That was actually Dracula's throwing pottery at Wolfman.
Wolfman and Dracula are fighting.
They're having a real battle royale I want to watch.
And it's the real Dracula and the real Wolfman.
But anyways, that joke about the candle was actually pulled from an earlier Abbott and Costello film where they were fighting, or not fighting, but meeting ghosts. And they just took that joke and put it into this movie again. And there were a lot of those kind of bits that they just repurposed in different movies. And audiences were pretty okay with that. It was kind of like, oh, we know this one. We like this joke.
It was like going to see a stand-up. Like it still blows my mind that the first Abbott and Costello movie, they just do Who's on First.
Yeah. And that's what people
this
wanted.
is what you came here to see.
Yeah. That does weird me out. Like, people who go to comedians don't want to hear new stuff. They're like, hey, say that joke I already know the punchline to. Which is very odd. Like, they're laughing before the joke is even told.
By the way, if you ever want to feel like just a piece of shit that's done nothing with their life, Abbott and Costello came up with Who's on First like a month into their radio career.
Apparently, this actually fucked Costello up quite a bit because he was off his mark. So when Strange punched through that door, he actually whacked Costello in the back of the head with full force. He still sells the effect, though, and played the scene out.
Look, Dracula just threw something at somebody, and Super Dracula fly away.
This
is so weird.
Epic fucking ending to a battle ever. I love it.
This is the final time we see the canon Wolfman and Dracula. They're done after this. They don't get sequels. It ends with them plummeting into the ocean, which doesn't make any sense for that to be a killer thing for either of them, because they're both technically immune to everything but like sunshine, bullets.
Oh, do you think it's like Gandalf and the Balrog, like they're fighting as they sink into the earth while epic Howard Shore music plays? Just Wolfman punching a bat over and over.
They're still falling to the center of hell and just battling the whole way for the inevitable Wolfman versus Dracula follow-up that never happened.
And this entire time, Vincent Price as the Invisible Man has been in every scene.
Just fucking around, like, interesting.
Jerking off.
Oh no, it's Van Pelt.
Whoa! Goodbye! These characters
have
jump into the water and just disappear from the movie. That's the end of them.
They're made of salt. They're made of sugar. They just melt.
It's all the kids from Jeepers Creepers 2 when they get off the bus.
I have such a fond memory of like watching this like 7 o'clock in the morning when I was a kid and seeing the first time the Wolfman fucking grabbed Dracula as a bat and leaped off that fucking balcony.
Oh, it was astounding. Like, as a kid, that's so impressive. You don't even take into account like the kind of junky special effects as they fall into the ocean. You just believe what's happening.
No, that moment is the entire third act of Avengers Endgame when you're like 7.
It really, even though we get like maybe 30 seconds of them actually fighting, and it's just Dracula throwing pots at
pots
Wolfman.
And chairs and shit.
Also, it's a little funny. This is really just the ending to Freddy versus Jason.
Pretty much.
Like, you have the monster on a flaming pier, and that's just the end of the monsters.
So I love this action figure that starts walking through the flames coming up.
It would help if the arms moved at all.
That's why he's so stiff in the rest of the movie. They were preparing you for this one shot. Everything about this scene screams, we've been shouting this for 7 hours. Get the goddamn take. I don't make any sense in this movie, but I'm Vincent Price, and you need one more joke to end on. I love that Vincent Price was Thanos for this movie. Uncredited, too, because they knew audiences would know.
But those old school special effects, they impress me even more than when something is done flawlessly with CGI. How did they get the smoke to puff away? Was there a little fan they had off screen somewhere that was strong enough to push the smoke without it looking like it was in a hurricane?
They
The
just had
cigarette obviously had
Invisible
to be
Man
pulled
there.
up by like wires or something. It's so impressive. I want to know how they did all that. It's so weird watching old movies now because the credits are already done, and normally we have about 10 minutes to unwind.
It's weird, right? It's like I don't know what to do now.
The movie's done. Please leave the theater.
That
God,
movies had their shit together back then. Dawn, get the fuck out.
It must have
Only
been so
5
great to
people
be.
worked on this. We swear. Get out of here.
It must have been so great to be an usher back in that day. People just filed out.
Actually, I was doing some reading on that. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier on the show or not, but before the 60s, a lot of theaters would just show everything on loop. So you would have Abbott and Costello play, a B picture would play, there'd be some like news bits or comic shorts to fill up the space between those, and it would all be on one cycle where they'd do that loop over and over, and people would walk in and out of the theaters, realize, oh, I came in halfway through the A picture. I'll just stay until we get through the A picture again, and then leave. So audiences weren't trained to be like, oh, fuck, I got to make the 2 o'clock showing or it's not worthwhile. They'd be like, oh, let's just walk into the theater, see what's going on, and then stick around for 4 hours.
Hitchcock is the big one that got it started. Like, no, you have to show up and watch the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, thanks to Psycho. He didn't want people arriving late and finding out spoilers for the picture. He wanted them to experience it as he intended. So he forced theaters to actually block people from entering the theater after the start time, which was unheard of at the time, really. And the movie was so popular, that just was a trend everyone followed afterwards. There's a start time, that's when you get to the theater. If you get in late, you're an asshole.
And the immediate escalation to that was Castle just threatening to murder you if you reveal the ending of Mr. Sardonicus.
Well, he wasn't wrong. It wasn't like that was a book that he was adapting that people could have just read. I like how we got into something actually factually like interesting and sound, technically after the movie ended.
It's good to go out on a high note.
Yeah, here's some really good, fascinating history for you. Did you stick around? Good. That's your post-credit scene. Anyways, folks, that was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Not technically a versus movie, but fuck it.
Hey,
nobody tells me how to live.
Dracula and the Wolfman threw things at each other. They versed.
Threw down. That's very true, and that's why I've counted it. Although technically, if they really wanted to go that route, we could have gone with Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, because that's like the first time we actually had the monster rally thing in place, where all the characters just got jammed into one film to fight. But oh well, too bad. I don't like that movie as much as this one.
It is funny. We had way more apt movies for this theme in the Universal lineup. I think it was unanimous that we were just like, no, we're doing Abbott and Costello.
We just wanted an excuse to watch Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. That's really it.
Pretty much it. I love this movie. I really do. It's one of my favorites from childhood, and still makes me laugh. Anyways, folks, this has been Box Office Pulp. If you would like more of our materials, we have other commentaries. We have non-commentary episodes if you want something marginally shorter. All on www.boxofficepulp.com. Or you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, or Twitter. We occasionally tweet. I would say we're up to something like one every week. Check us out. Am I forgetting something? I always feel like I'm leaving something off a list.
You can make up some.
Nah, it sounds like work. Anyways, folks, that's a wrap. Get the hell out of here.
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
Do you know Abbott and Costello broke up because they were at a party with Errol Flynn where he was showing them vacation slides and played hardcore pornography instead?
Oh.
And Bud and Lou both thought for the rest of their lives that the other one was in on it.
The story I heard was, I think it was Costello got drunk one time when they were supposed to be performing live, and Abbott was so mad about this, he just broke up the relationship. I think that's what they mentioned on the DVD commentary, but even the guy telling that story says, I don't think that's true. So I don't know why he told us that.
I like Errol Flynn's version because that's technically him admitting to showing hardcore pornography to children.
Yeah, that's the version we want to be real.
And he was dressed like Robin Hood.
I just want to point out that was from his posthumously released autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways by Errol Flynn.
Oh boy.
It's the greatest name for a old Hollywood star autobiography I've ever heard. The only thing that can complete is, I fucked your mother. A look inside of Klaus Kinski.
Ugh.
Oh, God. Let's not end on a Klaus Kinski note.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.